Welcome back, YouTube. Thanks for coming and checking out another Fat Guy Builds episode. Today, we're doing sway bars and end links on my little Focus. It's been a long time. I should have done this model a long time ago, but it's all good. I did make some more changes to the settings on the camera, so let me know what you think of the quality, and let's get to this build. First thing we're gonna need to do, obviously, is get the car off the ground. Preferably, you're going to want to do this on a lift, but if you got jack stands, do it on jack stands. Here's the part number for the kit. Here's the part number for the front sway bar. Here's the part number for the front sway bar end links. Take the wheels off. Now that all the wheels are off, first thing we're going to do is just tear apart everything, and I'm going to do the front and the back tear down at the same time. Then I'm going to do the front and the back install. Now that we have the wheels off, we can get to the sway bar end link here and here. There's going to be a couple different ways to do this depending on how your setup ends up wanting to come apart. So your best bet for the top one is a 15mm and a impact, and then you pull the bar so it touches in the back the whole time, right? That'll put friction on the centerpiece so it doesn't spin, and you rattle this piece off. If that doesn't work, then the center is a 5mm Allen head, 5mm, and then you're gonna have to figure out a way to hold this sucker right here. Because a box wrench or a open-end wrench won't fit in this groove. So you're going to have to grab it some other way and then spin the center while you're holding that. On the bottom, it's the same thing. You're going to have a 15, and then the centerpiece, you're going to want to be under the car to get that one. So I'm going to take PB Blaster, the oil, penetrating oil, and I'm going to spray all 4 of them. So one of them came off just with the impact, this one didn't. So I'm gonna use some needle nose, grab here, and then use a 5mm here. Remember, if you're doing it this way, you're gonna spin the center as if you're tightening it, and then that'll loosen it. Slide this wheel speed sensor. There's a little grommet right here, and you're going to just push it out of the groove. For the lower one, get a 15mm ratcheting wrench, and then your 5mm Allen, and you're just going to set the ratchet with the 5mm to tighten on it, the setting, and then you're going to have the ratcheting wrench to lefty-loosey, and you're going to let the ratchet just rest against that control arm and just take it off. You're going to do the same thing on both sides. For the front sway bar end links, you want to match orientation like that. Then you're going to make it where it's spun in all the way, and then you're going to hold these 2 ends down and spin the centerpiece to get it roughly the same length as the factory one. Remove the 2 bolts for the exhaust hanger support, and then you're going to also remove the bolt to remove this cross member here, and remove this big one and these 2 little ones, and then this whole cross member piece will come down as one piece. Don't undo this one or this one, because that's what keeps these 2 pieces bolted together. So leave that alone. And when you do this, you're going to need some spin jacks or something to support your cross member here, or your chassis, whatever you want to call it, subframe chassis. So you're going to have to support this while you take all that off. You're going to need to remove this bolt here on both sides. This bolt here requires a 15 millimeter. On the cross member, these 4 bolts here are 15. On the cross member, these 4 here are 13 millimeter. On the cross member and subframe, this right here is a 21 millimeter on both sides. Once you get that cross member out, you're gonna put these bolts back in, because now we have to break loose these 2 bolts that go up in here. So there's one there and one right there, and we got to do it on both sides. Once you have all the bolts broken loose, now you can remove these big 21s for good, so you can do the job. You have 3 bolts holding the steering rack to the subframe. You have one here, one here. The 3rd bolt is right under the downpipe to the right of the downpipe, and you're gonna have to bend that little heat shield up a little, and then you can get a socket on there to break it loose. With the cross member farther down, here's a good shot of where that 3rd steering rack bolt is. Okay, so the steering rack bolts, you only need to remove about halfway. You just need enough so that this thing will move. Then you pop off your grommet little mount here for the downpipe. Now you can pull this, and we can pull the sway bar down through this hole. You only need to get it out one side first and then the other side. See, like this. So I'm gonna do 2 hands now so I don't drop this on my floor or hit my foot or anything crazy like that. But yeah, you just tilt it down, and then I need to finish pulling this the rest of the way out. So if they're not matching, then you have the rear one out instead of the front one. Anyways, hopefully none of you would do that. Lay it out so they match the way it sits in the car. Put these grommets on. Now we're gonna feed this new one back into the car. Take a hammer, smack the old shackles off so we can reuse them. Once you get it in, use the stock shackles, and then put the stock bolts back in and get it just snugged a little. Next thing you're gonna do is center up the sway bar in between the shackles. So you need to have the same amount of space here on this end as you do on this end, and then torque down the sway bar hardware. Put the little orange brackets up against the bushing tight, and then tighten down the 2 Allens. That way now the sway bar cannot move side to side. Slide this little bracket on, and then lift the subframe up again. Try to line up the 21 millimeter bolts. Get these 2 15 millimeter bolts just barely started. That way you can torque on the steering rack without the whole subframe moving around. Use a 21 millimeter box wrench and then a torque wrench with an 18. I torqued these down to 100 foot-pounds. That's probably more than what it's supposed to be, but it felt good. It didn't feel loose and it didn't feel too tight. Go ahead, start tightening down the steering rack bolts a little bit. So just take up the slack. It'll make your life easier at the end of the day. So I think I'm gonna start with this back one. Get it down to where it's touching. Then I'm gonna lift the subframe back up. You're gonna wanna put everything in except these big bolts right now. And just get them where everything's loose. And then slowly snug them up. And then use the marks from where the bolts were before in order to line up this cross member where it's supposed to be. Then tighten all the little ones down. Then we're going to use that to help line up the K member or subframe or whatever you want to call it. There's little wear marks up there. Going to try to get that as close as possible. And then get the big bolts in. Same thing on this side. So I'm going to do all this right now. Tighten up all these little ones to match the wear marks. As soon as I lined everything up, tighten the little ones, raised this up a little bit more till it touched. Then go ahead and tighten these down. I torqued them to 80 foot-pounds, these little ones. And then these just perfectly slipped in. Didn't have to try to line it up or nothing. It went right back on the wear marks. So I slide them in, tighten them down. I tightened them down to 150 foot-pounds, these ones. It seemed like they felt good. Didn't seem too loose or too tight. So now I'm gonna go around and torque all these smaller ones down to like 50 foot-pounds. All these. You slide in the end links, one washer on each side, and then a nut. Use a 5mm and a 5mm Allen 17mm box wrench. I use a ratcheting box wrench. Tighten up the bottom, tighten up the top on one side, tighten it all the way down. Then we go on the other side, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to tighten one piece all the way down, and then we're going to spin the center till it's nice and flush. Then we'll tighten the top one down, and then we'll check the preload in the middle. You're going to grab this thing now, hook the speed sensor back into that grommet holder, and then slide this over. Use the wrenches like this, put the box wrench in there like that, and then lefty-tighty on the centerpiece. Now the top and the bottom's tight, so you're going to spin this till it gets tight. Till it gets tight. So right here, see there's no load, it's super easy. So you want it there, lock it down. So the front was a pretty big job. Yeah, that's a lot of work. If you don't have a lift, do not do the front one, because doing that shit on the ground, no, just no. I mean, if you hate yourself, then do it, but yeah, no, don't do that. So get a lift, rent a lift, pay somebody with a lift. Here's the part number for the rear sway bar. Here's the part number for the rear sway bar end links. For the rear end link, we're going to have the same 5mm Allen and a 14mm nut. For the rear sway bar link, on the bottom, you're just going to take a 13mm and take this nut off. Now that the end links are disconnected, on the rear here, I got two 13mm. Use a deep socket so you clear the shackle, and you're going to disconnect all 4 of these bolts. Once you take those 4 bolts out, the bar pretty much just falls out. And I'm setting it here so that I can get the orientation correct for the bushings and everything in the new one. So these ones don't seem like they're going to come with grease. they have like this hair. So yeah, they have like fabric sticking out on the inside so they don't squeak. I'm not sure if you can make it out. There you go. Look at that. That's something new I've never seen. I guess we'll see if it squeaks. You need to make sure the orientation is the same. So the end here, it turns down. Okay? So this one's a little bit different angle because this stuff is on it, but the bar goes straight and then angles down. Just like that. If you had it flipped over, there'd be no gap here. Now we're going to take our new shackles. We're going to put them roughly in the same spot as the factory ones on both sides. Alright, so you slide the bar in. Like I said, this angle here should be in a downward fashion. I just started these bolts. Gonna get it snug down. You want this to be centered, so you want the gap here, that gap there, and the gap there to be the same as you're tightening it down. That way it's centered in the factory position. Torque these down to 35 foot-pounds. Take the supplied insert, tap it in with a hammer into the hole. You're going to do that on both sides. Now use this for reference, the brake caliper here, and raise it up till it touches. Now you want to see how it's lined up, and then you come to the other side and do the same thing, and you want it to look the same. That's pretty dang close. After centering the sway bar, pull the sway bar all the way down, slide over these little gold retainers. This is going to help the sway bar not move side to side. And then you're going to rotate this here to where it almost touches here, because it'll never be in the full down position. So when you go up, it's not going to touch anything, right? So you just set it like that. I'm going to go do the other side now, and you just tighten these down evenly. So the gap up here, the gap down here should be pretty much the same. Get those pushed while you're tightening it. Push it against this rubber grommet, and then this part is done. Start with everything loose, and then you want one washer here. You're going to want to get the bottom tightened up with a 17mm box wrench, ratcheting wrench, and the same 5mm Allen. And then now the box came with some washer spacers here, and so you want to sort of try to make this on less of an serious angle coming this way. So I'm gonna go ahead and put 3 washers on this side and the same thing on this side, right? I'm gonna put 3 washers on this side, and then that way the vertical link isn't as crazy tilted over, which puts a harsh angle here. Once both are in and nice and tight, I got the washers there, so it's good here. So I extended it a couple turns, and then what you want to do is find the spot with both of them where it's sort of like you go left, it gets hard, you go right, it gets really hard. Then you want to find the middle of that. So really hard is this piece is on the right. Let's say use this for reference. Now that's hard. So that's about what is that? 90 degree. So then if we turn it in the middle of here and here, that's the center. And now we lock these down. That allows it to have no sort of preload on the sway bar. So that means the sway bar is neutral as far as left to right. So now you're gonna hold the center with an 18 and tighten these locking nuts with a 17. Now it looks like we have everything done on the rear. So we got the end links tight, shackles tight, these little pieces tight all the way around. So now we can go ahead and just put the rear wheels back on. If you want it to be stiffer, like I said, you're going to want to use the innermost hole if you want it stiffer. But this car is already pretty good, so I'm just going to use the outside ones. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and checking out another Fat Guy Builds episode. I just got back from a test drive, and the outermost hole, which is the softest, is stiffer than stock. But if you want your car to drive like it's on rails, then put it on the innermost hole and you'll be happy. If you are expecting a massive difference, put it on the innermost hole and then you'll be happy. Just don't even waste your time putting it on the outside. So thanks again for coming and checking out my stuff. If you want to see more videos, hit subscribe and hit like, dislike, whatever. And I messed with the camera again, so tell me what the quality looks like. Tell me what the audio sounds like. And until next time, wrench on.